What would you do if, on the most important day of your life, the person who was supposed to love and protect you humiliated you in the worst possible way? That's exactly what happened to Katya. Dressed in white, ready to seal an eternal commitment, she believed she was standing in front of her fairy tale until everything turned into a nightmare. In front of hundreds of guests, without warning, without hesitation, her own fiancé humiliated her in a way that no one could have predicted. The silence in the church was deafening. Everyone looked, but no one did anything. Everyone judged, but no one reached out. At that moment, Katya could have kept quiet. She could have accepted it. She could have carried on with the farce like so many others would have done. But contrary to what William and her mother expected, she did something that no one had the courage to do before. She said no. She said enough. And in that instant, her story stopped being about pain and became about strength. But Katya's decision would not come without consequences. William wouldn't accept being rejected. Helena would not tolerate being challenged. What began as a broken marriage would turn into a dangerous battle, where blackmail, harassment and threats would try to silence Katya. But they forgot one thing. When someone is driven to the bottom of the well, there is only one way out: to get back on their feet. And Katya would not only rise, she would crush those who tried to bring her down. If you think you've seen it all, wait until you hear this story, because what happened after that wedding will leave you speechless. The reflection in the mirror showed an anxious but radiant smile. Katya looked stunning in her carefully chosen dress, a model that had taken months to complete. Every embroidery told a story. Every detail was a piece of the dream she had built. Lucia gently adjusted her veil, admiring her friend. "It's perfect," she said, squeezing her hands lightly. Katya took a deep breath, trying to control the mixture of emotions that were stirring inside her. The wedding was the fulfillment of a long-held wish, and everything seemed to be going according to plan. "This is the beginning of everything," she murmured to herself, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The hall where the ceremony was to take place was decorated with white flowers and soft lighting. The music in the background created an enveloping atmosphere. The guests arrived one by one, exchanging smiles and greetings. Among them, Helena watched everything with critical eyes. Dressed imposingly, she conveyed the presence of someone used to having everything under control. William was already waiting for her at the altar. His gaze, however, didn't convey the expected enthusiasm. He seemed tense, distracted, constantly checking his cell phone. Katya noticed, but ignored the annoyance, focusing on the special moment that was approaching. When the wedding march began, everyone's attention turned to the bride. Katya's walk was slow and full of meaning. Her eyes searched for William, wanting to see in him the certainty she felt. But something was different. He seemed absent, impatient. At the moment of the vows, the tension became evident. Katya spoke her words with emotion, but William barely looked at her. His silence lasted longer than it should have. Murmurs began among the guests. "William?" Katya called out softly, trying to bring him back to the moment. It was then that he abruptly grabbed her wrist. His closed expression and impatient eyes showed unexpected irritation. Katya's heart raced, confused by his sudden attitude. "Do you think you can make a fool of me?" William's voice was low but charged with tension. Without warning, he pushed her hard enough to make her stagger backwards. Absolute shock spread through the room. The whispers ceased, and the silence became as heavy as lead. Katya's face burned, not from the physical impact, but from the humiliation. The world around her was spinning in slow motion. The gazes fixed on her. The lips parted in surprise, the music that had been abruptly interrupted. Nothing made sense. The man who claimed to love her had just exposed her to the worst pain she had ever felt. Katya held the hem of her dress tightly, trying to process what had just happened. Her mind was screaming at her to do something. Lucia, at the back of the room, was already stepping forward, ready to intervene. But Katya knew that it was up to her. Helena's voice broke the silence, cold and emotionless. "Don't dramatize it. Go back to the altar." Katia felt a silent fury rise up inside her. Why was no one doing anything? Where were the arms that should have held her? Her chest rose and fell rapidly, overwhelmed by the weight of what this meant. She looked at William. He didn't look sorry. On the contrary, his expression was one of pure disdain, as if what he had done was nothing more than an insignificant detail. It was at that moment that everything became clear. It wasn't an isolated scene. It was a reflection of something much bigger, something that, until that moment, she had refused to see. Slowly, Katia took off her veil, allowing it to slide down her shoulder and fall to the floor. The whispers came again, this time louder. Without saying a word, she removed the ring from her finger and placed it on the table next to the altar. The silence was broken by the sound of the jewel rolling over the glass. And then, without looking back, she turned and left. No one dared to stop her. Night had fallen when Katia finally stopped walking. Her feet hurt, her dress now felt like an unbearable weight, and her mind was spinning endlessly. What had just happened? How had everything fallen apart in a matter of minutes? Lucia found her sitting on the bench in the square in front of the church, her eyes lost in the emptiness. Her friend ran up to her, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Come on, let's go home," she whispered, without asking any questions. Katia didn't protest. She allowed herself to be led to the car, without looking back. The silence between them was thick, but Lucia understood that words would be useless at that moment. The journey was short, but every second felt like an eternity. When they arrived, Katia's brother was already waiting for them outside, his arms crossed and his expression closed. As soon as he saw her, he took a deep breath, fighting back his obvious anger. "I knew this guy was no good," he said, his voice full of indignation. Katia stared at him, but couldn't find the strength to reply. Her throat was dry, and any attempt to speak would result in tears that she refused to shed in front of William or anyone else. Inside the apartment, Lucia took a blanket and draped it over her friend's shoulders, while her brother sat down next to her on the sofa. "You don't have to say anything now," he said, his voice softer this time. "But I need you to know that we're with you, and that this story doesn't end here." Katia nodded slightly. The images still played in her head like a distorted movie. The push, the looks, Helena's cutting voice telling her to go back to the altar. William's lack of reaction, as if what he had done was trivial. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push the thoughts away, but the memories stuck in her like sharp blades. The minutes dragged by until Lucia, sitting next to her, picked up her cell phone and frowned. "He's trying to call you," she said, turning the screen to Katia. William's name flashed across the screen, followed by several unread messages. Her heart leapt uncomfortably in her chest. She didn't want to hear his voice. She didn't want to give him any explanation. "Hang up," he said, his voice hoarse. Lucia obeyed without hesitation, but the phone vibrated again. This time, a new notification popped up. A message from an unknown number. "You've ruined everything, but it's not over." Katia felt a shiver run down her spine. Her brother took the phone from Lucia's hand and looked at the message. His eyes darkened, and his jaw clenched. "He thinks he can intimidate you, but he won't be able to." Silence filled the room again. Katia crossed her arms, feeling the weight of the day fall on her shoulders. She didn't know exactly what to do next. But one thing was certain. She would never go back to William. The sun was up when Katia opened her eyes. She hadn't really slept, just spent the night between short naps and unsettling thoughts. The reality of everything that had happened the day before weighed on her like an anchor. Her wedding dress, now crumpled and dirty, was still lying in the corner of the room. She sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. Lucia entered the room with a steaming cup of tea and a worried look on her face. "Did you manage to get some rest?" she asked, sitting down next to her. Katia shook her head slightly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see everything all over again," she murmured. Lucia held her hand tightly. What happened doesn't define you, Katia. You did what any strong woman would do. You got up and left with dignity. She wanted to believe those words, but the humiliation still burned inside her. Everything she had built alongside William had crumbled in seconds. What were the guests saying now? How were he and Helena dealing with the scandal? The question was answered minutes later when her brother appeared holding his cell phone with a heavy expression. "You need to see this," he said, handing the device to Katia. It was a video. The scene from the ceremony, the moment William pushed her, was circulating on social media. There were hundreds of comments, speculations, judgments. Some people defended her, others tried to minimize what had happened. She felt her throat tighten. "They're trying to turn the tables," her brother said indignantly. "Some people are saying that it was just a disagreement, that you overreacted by leaving like that." Lucia snorted, disgusted. How can they put something like that into perspective? It was an assault, not a disagreement. Katia took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. What was she supposed to do? Ignore it? Speak up? Before she could decide, a new sound filled the room. Lucia's phone vibrated on the table. A new message. "Do you think you can get rid of him that easily? It's not over." Katia's blood ran cold. Her brother picked up the phone and looked at the message. "This is going too far," he growled. Lucia crossed her arms. "I told you this man and his mother wouldn't take no for an answer." Katia felt a knot in her stomach. They had only just begun. The weight of the message was still hanging in the air when Katia stood up abruptly. Her body was filled with a mixture of fear and anger. Wasn't everything William had done enough? Now he wanted to chase her, try to bend her through fear. Lucia watched her friend carefully, sensing the inner turmoil that was unfolding. Her brother, on the other hand, was already picking up the phone. "I'm going to sort this out now." "What are you going to do?" Katia asked, her voice still full of tension. "Tell him that if he continues with this kind of threat, he'll regret it." But before he could dial, the sound of the doorbell echoed through the apartment. The three of them looked at each other, the tension rising. Lucia walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Her expression hardened. "It's him!" Katia's heart raced. William was there outside, just one day after humiliating her in front of everyone. "What does he want?" she whispered. Her brother stepped forward to open the door, but Katia grabbed his arm. "No, I'll sort it out myself." Lucia's eyes widened. "Katia, you don't have to do that." She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I do. He needs to hear from me that it's over." With a quick gesture, she unlocked the door and opened it. William stood there, impeccably dressed, as if nothing had happened. His gaze was intense, but it carried a coldness that made her shiver. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly. He spread his arms in a theatrical gesture. "I've come to talk." "Can't I do that? After what you did yesterday, you have no right to show up here," he snapped. William sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You overreacted, Katia. You turned a bad moment into an unnecessary scandal." She felt her blood boil. "I overreacted. You assaulted me, and now you're threatening me with messages." He smiled sideways. "Messages? I haven't sent anything. Maybe you're imagining things." Katia clenched her hands into fists. "Go away. We have nothing more to talk about." His smile faded. His expression turned grim. "Do you think you can just walk out of my life like that? You've humiliated me, Katia. Do you have any idea what that means to me?" Her brother stepped forward, putting himself between the two of them. "If you don't leave now, I'll make sure you regret coming." William held his gaze for a few seconds before taking a step back. "This isn't over," he muttered before turning and leaving. The door was locked immediately. Katia felt her knees go weak. Lucia held her by the shoulders. "He won't give up easily." Katia's brother looked at them both, his expression heavy. "We need to get ready." The silence in Lucia's house was dense, almost suffocating. After William's unexpected visit, Katia felt exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop. She knew it wasn't an isolated incident. He and Helena would never accept her decision. Lucia, sitting on the sofa next to her, watched her friend. You can't live in fear, Katya. He wants to intimidate you. I know, she replied, holding the mug of tea that was already cooling between her fingers. But what do I do now? Her brother, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, answered before she had even finished her question. You get on with your life. Show that he doesn't control you. She looked at him, confused. How do I do that? He took a deep breath and came closer, sitting down in the armchair opposite her. You've always wanted to open your own design studio, but you never had the space to do so because you were stuck with it. Now you do. Katya blinked in surprise. For a long time, that dream had seemed distant, suffocated by William's judgments and the way he belittled her ambitions. Lucia smiled. He used to laugh when you talked about it, didn't he? He always said it was a waste of time. Katya nodded slowly. But now it's time to prove him wrong. The idea began to take shape in her mind. To create something of her own, reinvent herself, become stronger. His brother stood up, determined. We can start looking for places for the studio tomorrow. I'll help you with whatever you need. Lucia agreed enthusiastically. So will I. For the first time since that disaster at the altar, Katya felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, the three of them went out to look for a space that could serve as the start of their business. They walked down several streets, visited small properties, commercial rooms that looked promising, but there was always something that didn't fit. They had almost given up when they found a small studio in the city center. The walls needed repair. The floor was worn, but there was potential there. Katya stepped inside and took a deep breath. This is it. Lucia clapped her hands in excitement. I knew you'd feel it. Her brother analyzed the place with a critical eye. It's going to need some renovations, but nothing we can't handle. That was it, the first step towards her new life. But she knew that William and Helena wouldn't make things so easy. The renovation of the studio began the next morning. The smell of fresh paint permeated the air, mixing with the dust from the old furniture that had been removed. Katya rolled up her sleeves, determined to turn the space into the realization of her dream. Lucia helped with the organization, while her brother coordinated the heavier repairs. Despite the hard work, there was a feeling of renewal in the air. Every brushstroke on the walls erased a bit of the past that Katya wanted to leave behind. Can you see now? Lucia asked, smiling, when she saw her friend looking at the space with shining eyes. Katya nodded. For the first time in a long time, yes. But the relief didn't last long. The next day, when she arrived at the studio, she found the door ajar. Her heart raced. As she pushed it open, she saw the damage, torn fabrics, destroyed patterns, the mannequin lying on the floor. Lucia entered behind her and gasped. It couldn't be a coincidence. Her brother, who had arrived shortly after, analyzed the space. That was a warning. Katya felt anger take over. William! Lucia clenched her fists. Or Helena. They knew they were being attacked, but they had no concrete proof. The next day, Katya decided to go ahead. She bought new materials, reorganized everything, and made sure the work continued. But the dirty game wasn't over. During the week, she received several anonymous messages with veiled threats. In one of them, there was a photo of her leaving the studio with her brother. This is going too far, he said when he saw the image. Lucia agreed. We need to take action before it gets worse. Katya knew they were right, but backing down was never an option. The day dawned tense. Katya hardly slept a wink at night, reliving the scene of the overturned studio, the anonymous messages, the uncomfortable feeling of being watched. But despite her fear, she decided to stick to her routine. She wouldn't let William or Helena control her through fear. The studio was beginning to take shape again. The new garments were being fitted, the fabrics carefully organized. Lucia prepared a list of potential clients, while her brother made discreet rounds of the place, making sure there were no more break-ins. Then the door opened. William walked in uninvited, as if he still had some right to that space. Katya's heart raced, but she refused to show any weakness. I thought you were smarter, he said, walking slowly around the room, his eyes analyzing every detail. After everything, you still insist on this? Katya crossed her arms. What are you doing here? Trying to save you from a mistake, she replied with a calculated tone. You know this project will get you nowhere. You need me. She felt a lump of indignation form in her throat. I need you as much as I need the threats I've been receiving. William's eyes flashed for a moment. Threats? He laughed, feigning surprise. It sounds paranoid, but I can help you, if you like. Lucia took a step forward, her gaze full of fury. If you care so much, then get out and leave Katya alone. William didn't even look at her. He kept his focus on Katya, waiting for a reaction, but this time there was no room for hesitation. Listen to me, Katya said, moving closer until they were just a few centimeters apart. You no longer have control over me. Not anymore. William's expression hardened. Let's see how long your bravery lasts. He turned and left, but not before casting her a look full of promise. This wasn't over. And Katya knew that the worst was yet to come. That night, Katya felt that something had changed. The meeting with William left a tension in the air, a nagging certainty that he wouldn't give up so easily. She tried to concentrate on her work, but the feeling that she was being watched wouldn't leave her. Her brother noticed her nervousness. You need to protect yourself. This has crossed a line. Lucia, who was organizing some papers on the counter, agreed. Let's go to the police. We have the messages, the break-in at the studio, and now his visit. But Katya hesitated. What if they don't do anything? William is influential, and Helena has contacts. Her brother took a deep breath, controlling his frustration. Then we'll find another way. The next morning, while she was organizing her notes in the studio, an employee from Helena's old company showed up. He looked around uneasily before approaching. I need to talk to you. Katya exchanged glances with Lucia before nodding. I'm listening. The man lowered his voice. I know Helena is behind all this. She can't accept what happened at the wedding and she wants to destroy you. Katya felt a chill run down her spine. Do you have proof? He hesitated for a moment and then handed over an envelope. Inside there are records of conversations, orders to keep an eye on you, and even attempts to harm your suppliers. She took the envelope with trembling hands. Why are you helping me? The man sighed. Because I saw what happened to other people who crossed her path, and I don't want you to be next. Before she could say anything else, he hurried off. Lucia opened her mouth to say something, but Katya just held the envelope tightly. Now she had something concrete against Helena, and it was time to use it. Katya looked at the envelope on the table. Inside was the evidence that could turn the tide against Helena. For years, this woman had manipulated situations in her favor, and now, finally, there was a way to expose her. Lucia and her brother stood next to her, equally tense. What do you intend to do with this? He asked. Katya took a deep breath before answering. I'm going to make it public. Lucia's eyes widened. Are you sure? Helena has always used her influence to escape consequences, Katya said determinedly. But now everyone will know who she really is. That same evening, Katya contacted a well-known journalist, known for investigating cases of abuse of power. She set up an interview, and the next day handed over everything she had. The repercussions were immediate. The records were leaked to the media. Compromising conversations, attempts at sabotage, and even veiled threats were exposed. Helena's image began to crumble, and with her, William was also dragged into the scandal. Messages of support began to appear. People who had previously doubted Katya's version now saw the truth. But not everything was positive. At the end of the day, an unknown message arrived on her phone. Do you think you've won? This is far from over. Katya's brother read the message and clenched his fists. They're still going to try something. Katya closed her eyes for a moment. I know that. But she was no longer the same woman who left that altar humiliated. Now she was ready for the final battle. News of Helena's exposure spread quickly. Social media was buzzing, newspapers were commenting on the case, and the pressure on her and William was increasing by the hour. What had previously been whispered behind the scenes was now out in the open. Katya knew that this didn't mean the end. If she had learned anything, it was that people like Helena didn't accept defeat easily. And she was right. That night, while she was organizing the last details in the studio, she heard a noise outside. Her heart raced. Lucia and her brother were in the next room, but she decided to check for herself. When she opened the door, she found William. This time he didn't seem arrogant. He was upset. "You've destroyed me," he said, his voice tense. Katya stood her ground. "No, William, you destroyed yourself." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You should never have stood up to me." Before he could take another step, Katya's brother appeared. "If I were you, I'd leave now." William hesitated, as if finally realizing that he had lost control. "It's not over yet," he whispered, before turning away and disappearing into the night. "But it is over." The next morning, Helena was formally charged with crimes of defamation, harassment, and commercial sabotage. William, involved in part of the actions, would also face consequences. The family business was hit by the scandal, and those who had previously supported them began to distance themselves. Lucia showed Katya an article published on a news website. "Look at this, they're ruined." Katya read the headline and sighed. She took no pleasure in their downfall, but she felt relief at finally being able to breathe without fear. Even with the lawsuits underway, she knew that her fight hadn't just been for herself. Other women who had experienced similar situations began sending messages of support, sharing their own stories. For the first time, Katya realized that her voice had become stronger than any threat. The next day, she returned to the studio. Now that space was not just a dream, but a reality built on her own strength. Lucia hugged her proudly, and her brother smiled when he saw her finally free. "You did it," he said. She looked around and felt something she hadn't felt for a long time: peace. With a deep sigh, she walked over to the large work table and picked up a piece of fabric. She ran her fingers over it, feeling its texture, and smiled. "So, are you ready for your new collection?" Lucia asked excitedly. Katya smiled. "I'm ready for anything," because now her destiny was in her hands alone.